Hi, this is Tremor at Wine Botany. Welcome back. And today is the first episode of that video blog. So, super excited. So what are we going to talk about? Well, I thought why not starting with the origins of wine with the beginning. It's a little bit the when, where, and how did wine happen. So we don't know for sure how it all started, but we have what we call the Paleolithic hypothesis, which means that some people probably one day found some fermented grapes left over in a jar or in a place, were intrigued by the smell, started to taste it, to eat it or to drink it, and they found the result quite pleasant. And they wanted to replicate it. So here, in order to replicate that, we have to look at the basic definition of wine, which is fermented grape juice. Because in order to get wine, you need, of course, the grapes, which you collect at the harvest time, and to make the actual wine. And to get the grapes, you need the vine in order to produce the grapes. So we have the cultivation and we have the vine making. Regarding the cultivation, there is a whole process called domestication. How did that happen? Because in nature, wild vines are climbers. They take anything as a support, like for instance a tree. So they would go all the way up to the canopy to reach for the light and start flowering and making fruits in order to start the reproduction process. Of course, it's not very practical to cultivate and to get the grapes unless you want to climb a tree every time you go there. So basically, people found out a way to prune the vines, to organize them better, and to put them at human height. Another interesting fact about wild vine is that it's what we call in botanical terms a dioecious plant. What does it mean? It means that it's a plant with some male plants and some female plants. Like for instance, perhaps you're accustomed to the ginkgo biloba trees. That's the same thing. And once again, not very practical to cultivate because in order to get the fruit, you need the female flowers, of course, to be pollinated. And this doesn't happen very easily if you have the plants separately. However, 2 or 3% of the wild vine are what we call hermaphroditic, which means that they are on the same plant. You can have both male and female parts on the flowers. And that's what people found out. And what they did, they selected those fruits from those 2-3% plants, and they started to cultivate the vine from there. And that's how we ended up with all the grape varieties we know of today. And this will come back to it in the next episode about the botany of wine. So this selection brought us to all the grape varieties. And by the way, if you're interested in grape varieties, I would highly recommend this book, Grapevines, Vine Grapes, which is about like 100 and 368 grape varieties, if I'm not wrong, with all the description, all the pictures and everything about that. If you really want to know about a grape variety, this is the book to get. So we're talking about like 6,000 to 9,000 years ago where all of this happened. And this is a time where people were slowly switching to a nomadism way of life, which meant they were going from one place to another to find food, to settle down and to start what we call today agriculture. So this is the cultivation part. Now for the winemaking part, it's all about fermentation. And in order to illustrate that, I wanted to present a couple of wines. I chose actually a vineyard called Archil Gunieva, which is located in Georgia because that's where it is estimated to have all started. Why Georgia? Probably because the mountains were protecting some plants from the glaciation areas, and that allowed them to flourish and then to spread later to other countries. So how did they do that? How did the people fermented the grapes? So it was all natural. They still use the same technology, those huge amphoras called cuevres, which are handcrafted from local clays. And they buried them usually in the ground in order to maintain the temperature. They seal it, of course, to avoid any oxidation, bacteria, etc. And they as well coat the inside with some beeswax. They put the grape in there, and they wait for kind of a long time, like 4 to 6 months of fermentation, which is a huge amount of time. And you can imagine that at the end of that, people are quite a little bit like stressed out about the result. But that gives an amazing result. So here I chose this producer. Usually I choose the producers with a few criteria. I like people who are self-conscious about the environment, about health, or using as less chemicals as possible in the whole process. I choose as well producers who are controlling and looking at the process from A to Z, which means from cultivating the vines to winemaking. Many producers, for instance, you have wine growers, winemakers. Some people can make the wine from grape they purchase from other people, and that could lead to some disruption in the process. In my opinion, when you have a global view of everything, you can better understand how what you do in the vineyards have an impact to the final products, and that's very important. So that leads often to have like small to mid-sized producers because they want to focus on the quality and not on the quantity. So here we have a white wine, which is made from these indigenous grapes called the Cracuna, the Tsiska, and the Solicori. Sorry for the pronunciation, I'm doing my best. If you're Georgian, feel free to comment on this blog and let me know how to pronounce it correctly. But we can see right away that this wine doesn't look like a pure yellow wine. Actually, it's what we call an orange wine. What does it mean? It means that in order to ferment it, you let sit the skins of the grapes with the juice. Usually, to get white wine, you just take the juice and you ferment it. You have to know that inside a grape, the pulp is always transparent. You can have a white wine from black grapes, from red grapes, which is called, for instance, in French, a blanc de noir, white from black or red. For instance, in Champagne area, a blanc de noir would be made exclusively from Pinot and Pinot Noir, which are two red grape varieties, but it's a white Champagne. And a blanc de blanc, for instance, white from white, is a 100% Chardonnay in the Champagne area. So here in the fermentation process, we have the skin which are left over, and that gives this kind of amber color. And we will see that it gives as well an extra taste and an extra kick to the smell. So here we have really an interesting smell, like dried fruit, almost a little bit, like those wines from the Jura, yellow wines and things like this, with notes of like dried fruits or peach or mango, something very complex and very, very nice to smell. The taste is really refreshing, but also more complex than a usual white wine, which means that you can definitely feel this little astringency, which means, when your tissues are tightened. And that's due by those components called tannins, which are part of the skins and the stalks of the grapes, which are left to ferment in there. For the red wine, here we have another indigenous grape called Gallo Blishvili, once again difficult to pronounce, but very interesting grape. Why that? Because it's the subject of scientific studies recently, some research, because this grape variety shows some resistance to this disease, what we call the downy mildew, which is kind of a mushroom attacking the vine. And this is a post that I put on Wine Botany, actually, because it's highly interesting to see how it could potentially be an eco-friendly solution to pests and diseases. So here, same thing, like dried prunes, kind of caramel taste of this wine. And really this amazing texture. So not too watery, but more of a light-bodied wine. I would say very pleasant, with grilled meat, like barbecue time, as we're starting to enjoy that. So that would be the perfect wine. I mentioned the grape variety book about that. It's really interesting to refer to that if you're interested in that. But I also wanted to mention that when the grape variety started in Georgia, they spread after that to other countries, like around Mediterranean countries and then other countries through various civilizations like the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians. And if you want to learn more about that, it's not exclusively about grapes, but it's about all the explorers who went around the world, especially during that century, in the 17th century, where they went and how they moved, they discovered the fruits, the vegetables from one place to another, how tomatoes ended up in Italy, for instance. They are not at all origin from there. So it's a lot to discover and to enjoy. So thanks for watching, drink wisely, and see you soon. Cheers!